I heard the key turn in the lock. My breath caught in my throat. Just seconds ago I had leaned in, my lips brushing against his, heat rising between us. It wasn't supposed to happen. It wasn't planned. But in that instant it didn't matter. Then the door swung open. My husband stood in the doorway. I froze. The world shrank to that single moment. The pause before impact, the weight of something irreversible. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. I waited for the explosion, for the accusations, the betrayal, the storm that was about to hit. But it never came. He just looked at me. A long, unreadable stare. No anger. No shock. Nothing. Then without a word he turned around and closed the door behind him. I exhaled, my body trembling, confusion tightening around my ribs like a vice. My lover stepped back, his face pale, his breathing shallow. Neither of us spoke. Because this wasn't normal. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. No yelling, no confrontation, just that unbearable silence. And that's when I realized, whatever had just happened, whatever he saw, it was only the beginning. 2 months ago the thought of cheating had never crossed my mind. My life was stable, predictable, safe. My husband and I had a routine, a comfortable existence built on years of habit. But passion, that had faded long ago, replaced by polite conversations, shared responsibilities, and the quiet understanding that this was just how marriage worked. No fireworks, no excitement, just two people coexisting. Then he appeared. My husband's best friend. Charismatic, full of life, the kind of man who drew attention effortlessly. He wasn't like my husband. He laughed loudly, spoke with confidence, made me feel seen in a way I hadn't in years. At first it was harmless. Just casual conversation, innocent smiles, passing glances that lingered a second too long. Then one evening something shifted. He leaned in closer, his voice lower, his presence overwhelming. His hand brushed against mine and I felt something I hadn't in a long time. I should have pulled away. I should have ignored the way my pulse quickened. But I didn't. Because for the first time in years I felt alive. It happened at a friend's party. The house was filled with laughter, glasses clinking, music humming softly in the background. I hadn't laughed like that in years. Real, effortless laughter that didn't feel forced. He sat next to me, leaning in just enough that his presence became something tangible, something I could feel even without looking. His energy was intoxicating, pulling me in, making me forget about everything else. Then suddenly he was closer. A fraction of an inch, a breath between us. My mind screamed at me to move, to step back, to remind myself that this was wrong. But I didn't. I let it happen. The warmth of his lips brushed against mine, and in that instant the world faded. It was reckless, dangerous, irreversible. When we pulled away, neither of us spoke. We didn't have to. That moment had already rewritten everything. The next day he sent a message, just a joke, casual, nothing incriminating. Then another. And another. And then late one night his words cut through my carefully built walls. You don't think about him when you're with me. Admit it. I couldn't stop. It was like something had been switched on inside me, something I had forgotten existed. Every morning I woke up thinking about him. Every night I fell asleep replaying the way his voice sounded, the way his eyes locked onto mine like we shared some unspoken secret. I tried to be normal, to go through the motions of my life like nothing had changed. I looked at my husband across the dinner table, forcing a smile, feeling guilt coil around my ribs like a vice. But the moment my phone buzzed, the moment I saw his name light up my screen, all of it disappeared. I answered before I could think, before I could remind myself that this was dangerous. We found excuses to see each other. Small moments stolen between the obligations of our real lives. A quick coffee before work, a chance encounter at the grocery store, a passing touch that no one else would notice. It was a game we both pretended wasn't real. Then one evening his message changed everything. Come see me. No excuses. I booked a hotel. That night I felt his arms around me, strong, familiar, the weight of years together pressing into my skin. My husband kissed me, soft, steady, the way he always had. I closed my eyes, tried to sink into it, tried to find something in the warmth of his lips, the safety of his touch. But there was nothing. No spark, no rush, no fire. Just routine. Just the ghost of what we used to be. I pulled away first, mumbling something about being tired. He didn't question it, just smiled, kissed my forehead and turned off the bedside lamp. Minutes later his breathing slowed, deep and even. He was asleep. I wasn't. My hands, my hands trembled as I reached for my phone, heart hammering before the screen even lit up. And there it was, his name, his message waiting for me in the dark. "You're coming, right?" 3 words, but they carried more weight than they should have. I stared at them, my pulse quickening, my mind already made up before I could even pretend to hesitate. I was already gone. The hotel wasn't what I expected. No dim lights, no heavy air of secrecy. Just an ordinary place, clean, quiet, almost too normal for what I was about to do. My hands felt cold despite the heat pulsing through my veins. I shouldn't be here. I knew that. But I was. And there was no turning back. He was already waiting in the lobby, leaning casually against the desk, too calm, too certain. I envied that. As soon as he saw me, he smirked. "You're nervous," he said, amused. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to meet his gaze. "You wouldn't be here if you didn't want this." His voice was smooth, steady, as if my hesitation was just part of the game. I wanted to deny it. I didn't. Upstairs, the silence between us was deafening. He stepped closer, his breath warm against my skin. My pulse pounded. "I should stop this." "I won't." His lips brushed mine, and just like before, I didn't pull away. I didn't know that outside in the parking lot someone was watching. And that this moment would cost me everything. Something had changed. My husband wasn't the same. He didn't ask where I'd been, didn't question my late nights, but the silence between us had shifted. He watched me differently, too long, too careful, as if studying every word, every move. The casual ease we once had was gone, replaced by something heavier, something that made my stomach twist. He wasn't angry. He wasn't distant. He was waiting. And that terrified me more than anything. Then I noticed something else. His best friend, the man who had once laughed with me, teased me, treated me like family, was suddenly avoiding me. He no longer joked, no longer looked me in the eye. I caught him once standing in the kitchen with my husband, their voices low, serious. The second he saw me, he stepped back, muttered an excuse, left without another word. I wanted to ask him, "What do you know?" But I didn't have to. I saw it in the way he avoided my gaze, in the stiffness of his shoulders, in the unspoken truth hanging between us. He knew. And that meant my husband did too. It was supposed to be quick. Just a few stolen minutes over coffee, nothing reckless, nothing suspicious. The cafe was crowded, voices blending into a low hum of background noise, the scent of roasted beans hanging thick in the air. I told myself we were safe. No one was watching. No one would care. But I should have known better. He leaned in, his fingers brushing against mine, the warmth of his touch sending a familiar shiver down my spine. "You're tense," he murmured, his eyes locked onto mine. "Relax." I tried, but the weight of the past few weeks sat heavy on my chest. My husband's silence. His best friend's avoidance. The feeling that everything was closing in. Then, before I could stop him, before I could think, he kissed me. It wasn't planned. It wasn't slow. It was instinct, impulse, too fast to undo. And that's when I felt it. A presence. A stare. My stomach dropped. My breath caught. I turned, heart pounding, and there he was. My husband. Standing across the cafe. Watching. And for the first time I saw it in his eyes. He had been waiting for this moment. I spent the entire evening waiting for the explosion. My heart pounded with every passing second, the silence in the house suffocating. I expected rage, accusations, a storm of words that would shatter everything. But when my husband finally walked in, he didn't yell. He didn't even look angry. He simply sat down across from me, his face unreadable, his hands folded on the table like we were about to discuss something as mundane as dinner plans. The calmness unsettled me more than shouting ever could. My pulse hammered in my ears as I searched for something to say, some excuse, some way out. But he spoke first. "You've been gone for a long time, haven't you?" His voice was quiet, steady, too controlled. My mouth opened, but no words came. What was I supposed to say? Deny it? Lie? He exhaled slowly, shaking his head as if he already knew. "I knew," he said. "I've known for a while." My stomach twisted, the air in my lungs vanishing. This wasn't anger. This was something worse. This was the beginning of the end. He didn't yell. He didn't demand answers. He didn't even look at me again. He just stood up, grabbed his keys, and walked out the door like I was nothing. Like we had never built a life together. Like I wasn't worth the fight. The silence he left behind was heavier than any words could have been. I wanted to chase after him, to explain, to beg, but my body refused to move. My phone vibrated. My breath caught. For a split second I thought it was him. A chance. A mistake I could still fix. But it wasn't. It was my lover. I think we should stop this. That was it. No apology. No explanation. Just a cold, detached ending, as if I had been nothing more than a temporary distraction. My chest tightened, my hands clenched, my world shrank into something small and empty. No husband. No lover. No one. I had convinced myself I was in control, that I could have it all without consequence. But in the end I was wrong. I wasn't the one playing the game. I was the one who got played.